Buenas tardes. Estou um pouco impressionado. Não sou... Ok. Gracias to Liga, gracias to you to be here. I will speak in English. I will try. I didn't know how to try to start tonight to present you a kind of bit of my work, kind of small part. So I passed like 2 hours today, like in a kind of huge stress. And then finally, Adriana tell me you should do what you want, and Moises tell me you should do totally the contrary, the shortest thing you can do. So I found this picture on my series of curiosities with a drawing by Crumb. It actually was the cover of one of my favorite magazine when I was kid, because it was kind of forbidden magazine for the kids, because it was about sex, about freedom, about new culture. And one thing I really like about this cover is the title, with actual. It was also about counterculture, but first at all, it's about condition to be an architect today. It's also for me the perfect illustration of my condition. And as an architect, most of the time I feel like totally lost about what's appearing, what the world is doing, what things are going on. Sorry, I will okay. So, and many times I feel in this condition to be in a kind of unreal situation, kind of state of unreal. So, today I decide just to present not buildings, not what we call usually architecture, but most showing you kind of projects I like and I'm not used to show. So I will present you kind of petit kind of survey of what we do in Paris in our studio called Bureau des Mes Architectures, with Pascal, who is somewhere behind. With one person I start this office called Office of Miss Architecture. And to start, I will show you just 3 references. It's about talking about space and what we believe in terms of space. These 3 references is 3 movies. The first one is THX, with the first movie by George Lucas, where I find probably the most beautiful answer about what is architecture, with the jail in the movie. If you have seen this film, there is a beautiful scene where people is in jail, but the jail is an empty space, white, with no ending, no limits. The second movie is Tram. We talk also about a kind of, not a jail, but talk about space and probably a kind of territory where the bodies goes. For me, it's also an illustration about what is architecture. The third one, sorry, I make a mistake about that. Okay. Is Dawn of the Dead. And another scene we talk for me who is a kind of condensé of what is architecture, who is this supermarket when these people escape from the zombies and they are enclosed in the supermarket, in this shopping mall, and all the zombies come and cross the walls and beat into the walls. For me, these 3 movies talk about one thing really important, which for me the main thing about our work as an office of architecture is organizing trajectories. These trajectories can be individual or collective, hedonistic or versatile, but it is about organizing trajectories. I really believe our work, my work, our mission is about that. not anymore, not something else, just organizing trajectories. These trajectories are linked about one thing with the main thing in architecture, with the body. So tonight, tonight I will show you the project we don't use to show in the lectures, and starting with this quote of Peter Sloterdijk, who is probably the best quote about architecture today, who is also something for me, give me a lot of hope and kind of line in our practice, who is, if I translate it well in English, construction of islands is the inversion of the habitat. There isn't any more to do to put the edifice. I will translate it in my way. Architecture, it's not to put a building in a context. Architecture, it's to put a context in the building, a situation, an environment, if you want to talk about context. It's a bit slow. Okay. I was giving a talk, a discussion just before, and I was saying that the big problem with architecture today is this arrogance about being somebody and just forgetting what is architecture. Architecture is, credo, is something about passion, about doing and serving. It's an act of political. The mission of an architect is not only to do constructions, it's engage himself and to try to find maybe solutions, or if I want to extend it, ask questions to society. And this picture is just to start about saying, I not want to be this guy. So this is the point. Sorry. About our practice and studio in Paris, we gave a name a few years ago to this studio. It was Miss Architecture, a kind of tribute to two main figures of the 20th century for us. One is the pure architect, who is Miss Vandero, and not him exactly, but his plumber, who said about his architecture, it's a Miss Architecture. The second one is Gordon Matta Clark, who was the first architect who decided to prove to the world architecture is not anymore something indestructible, but something who can be also fragile as life. I want to start with just a first reference about my personal first project as an architect when I became, just after the school, an architect with the paper, who was what I call my first house, a small house for kids, who asked me to design their building, their castle. This castle exists for 2 months in Portugal and then disappeared, and it's probably until today my favorite project I did until now. To start tonight about the lecture I'm giving, I don't want to be really heavy, also because I think we have many things to do, but it's more a place to discuss, as you tell me. So I call this lecture or this presentation this very short overview on the work Brutal Fragility. It will be about moments, about trajectories. My work, as I tell you, our work, it's about organizing and trying sometimes to disturb trajectories, to disturb these organized trajectories of bodies. The first project, so I will just show you some stuff to be like a very philosophical way of presenting. So I will be more describing the project. The first one I choose is this flatland project for the Lisbon Foundation Gallus Gulbenkian, who asked us to design an installation for public, and we designed this flatland, just a moment to experience the risk to go into the screen and become the hero of one night in front of the public. So how the public can go out being spectators and becoming what is the most important, being an actor, trying to smash the screen. My probably first text, very naive, or my first statement as an architect was this small word about fragility, and we still continue about that. I was really naive when I wrote that, but I still believe that architecture is about fragility. It's about protecting, maybe, or saving, or emphasizing, or making something beautiful about things who are sometimes the most insignificant. About this fragility, a few years ago we did a project in China, who is now quite known. It's also an ephemeral project. This project is called The Unbelievable Lightness of Life. We changed the title because maybe it was too subversive for Chinese. It was in Shenzhen, just in front of, the small light doesn't work, but anyway, in front of the building of Ramkulas, the trade center in Shenzhen. And we built this ephemeral moment to experience fragility. What I want to say about fragility is something in our work, in what we believe, is something with a metaphor about your production and about something we find probably is the most important with in architecture, to build the space in between. The space in between people, between bodies and many other things. In this case, it was a kind of ironical proposal where these two bodies were swinging, will never touch each one. So a kind of impossibility of communication. The work I present, the work we develop is also about communication between people, and I think architecture is something about making the people exchange. So all these projects are about that, are about fragility, about communication, about individuals, about collectives. A kind of point between, let's say, the physical body, the electronical body, the virtual or electronical, the political body, the social body. What we want to do and what we try to do is build for these situations. First project or second project, I don't remember, I presented one before. Something about trajectories, what we call future will be a remake, a small kind of proposal for architecture. We can design it everywhere. It's just made with pencils, and the people who will use it will make it disappear. It was a project a few years ago. Was a kind of circle to talking about this very, very big issue about the transit of the bodies and probably the exchange and let's say the cross borders where many times we never think we can do. We try to do something in this case, it may be unacceptable, but we did it, which is what I believe in architecture also, is to be engaged and sometimes to take the risk to make proposals who are not valid. What we think also is architecture can have this part of failure. It's not something like doing a pyramid to celebrate eternity. It's also, as Gordon Metacloud did, something about just experiencing the danger and the emergency of doing. This project was for the Biennale of Venice in 2000, Architecture Biennale, and it was just a container, a kind of architecture to protect the body, an unacceptable architecture because the proposal was so stupid and so naive, as an architect can protect the body for migrants cross borders without risking their life. I did it as my probably first project of architecture built after the project for the kids. This project developed after that and maybe was part of the confusion of being an architect and doing this kind of moment where you cross the border and you make proposals and you start to explore what is space. And anyway, I will just describe. I think I'm trying to be a bit too much intellectual about these things. Architecture and our practice is also something sensible, sometimes just about feeling, about doing. One project we do a few years ago was this one, and I really like because it talks about experiencing the danger. It was from Yves Klein, The Jump in the Void, and we decided to make the architecture to experience the jump in the void by safety, because it's also part of our work to do things safety. So experiencing fragility needs to be also something take care. I was saying about communication and building the space between us. Sometimes you arrive to proposals who are so without meaning. You interrogate yourself, should I do it or not? In this case, it's a project called Double Ganger, where we try to materialize the kiss and the architecture of a kiss with this kind of strange mask for the people can, I don't know, no comment, no comment about that. It's also about some issues I think sometimes are really important with talking about the engagement of today. And for me, gender or all this question of relationship between people is really important, and we just try to do that. So I continue. Another project was about trajectories, about talk about gender and the space in between sexual or I don't know, between people. And we were invited to design a pavilion for love in a garden, a secret project. We don't succeed to do it, but all the process is interesting. It was how to make a pavilion for love, talking about what is love, what is the relation between people. And we start to work about this sign, which is really stupid sign, with just masculine, feminine, and something else. And we try to transform it very simply into basic elements about architecture, just asking what's mean a kind of more feminine or more masculine or more sexual space to make a pavilion. You know, this kind of follies in the 17th, 18th century in the park. It was exactly the same commission. And we start to manipulate it like a triangle. Is it a triangle more masculine? Is it a circle or a wood? And then we escape to a kind of manipulation of this intersection to design something. I don't know if it's contemporary. We have some friends who interrogate this question of what is contemporary. So we design a pavilion. For me, is contemporary, or I don't know. I don't care about that, but there is the pavilion. It was never built. So at the end, the only object we built for the client was this kind of vanity, a kind of marble model, and it's on the collection of the client. I would prefer the pavilion to see if at one moment the people can meet inside and on this kind of small platform celebrate the desire. Well, something. Wow. I was talking about trajectories, and one of very important project for us was the project we did before the last project before renovation at the storefront in New York, with really a really interesting paradigm about what is contemporary architecture, with this question of the limit and the question of the threshold. And we did this, it was at the period of the Guantanamo and all these things. And we tried to manipulate the space to produce the in-between space and to materialize the in-between outside and outside. This project was designed, the storefront for architecture in New York was designed by Stephen Hall and Vito Acconci. And for me it was interesting to be invited there before they renovate, because it's also an illegal space. It was built without authorization, and from there it started to exist with really interesting issue. But one thing was for me, in a way, the success but also the failure of the project is basically the threshold, the space between outside and inside still exists in the project of the storefront, in the architecture of the storefront. And the thing we propose them is to materialize the in-between space and enclose this in-between outside and outside. And at the end it generates this strange practice of the space who was to cross and to experience this thing, the space of transit. This project was a metaphor for another project in LA at the Laxart. It was a totally different situation, totally different city, and totally different topic where we work again on this notion of borderline and migration. And one thing I don't mention you, but the project is not here today, so I will not mention it. I will have some mystery about tonight. Voilà. I don't know why I should that. It doesn't work probably. So I make a pause. I take a break. So I am in the middle of my presentation. So I just show you some projects quickly. About communication, a kind of silent communication, a kind of architecture, portatile architecture about discussion, about the in-between. It's a kind of, this project was a kind of proposal for a one-to-one protest. And at the end it was about kind of arguing in the street and talking about things that are important. And maybe many times what we said, what we try to change, what we try to achieve is like, you know, words floating in the air. So this project was this project was to make a kind of portable architecture to speak and argue about pollution, about, I mean, visual pollution, about architecture, and etc. My grandfather used to say, never apologize. So tonight I will do the contrary. I will apologize because I did it this afternoon. The common thing we have is this thing about riots, about contest. One of the most basic architecture is these barriers. And last year we started to design this barrier with a kind of folly, a kind of joke about the barrier, organizing fake gardens with these barriers. I have no explanation about that. It's too recent project to explain it. My apologies is also sometimes I don't want to explain or tell why the project exists. This one is like that. I don't know why. It was to make a joke about how to contest, I don't know. What I want to conclude, because I don't want to speak too long, I prefer to have a drink after with you to discuss, is about, I don't know, tonight I will not show, I didn't show, let's say, buildings or things. I show you small elements of architecture, small elements about our language, our proposals. Our big question in this moment is about interiors. It's about domesticity. It's about being maybe more low profile about cities and trying to act into interiors. And we start to design things for clients about very small interface. This one is how to avoid a kind of big space of discussion and to reduce it in a very, let's say, portable interior. It's a project for a TV show in France, but I think it will not, my proposal is too complicated for them, was a kind of point of discussion where people discussing start to have in the same delayed moment their own face projected in front of you. And this proposal for this TV program was to say at one moment an interview is always something which is manipulated and disturbed because the fact you never see, so you can say all the lies you want. If you are confronted to your face, to your voice, to your what you said, maybe it will change the thing into it. So we developed this project, arriving to another situation, who was a kind of fantasy about architecture. I don't know if it's positive fantasy or totally deceptive fantasy, who is a kind of new type of interiors, type where people will not have the necessity to have furniture, to have environment, but they exist by themselves, just discussing, etc. So the proposal transformed to a building, a kind of metaphor of the most fragile building we can build. It's called a high-rise building, the broken high-rise building. It was a proposal. It's just to tell you the truth, but sometimes I'm also a liar. So what you see maybe is not what is the truth, but it was a commission for an hotel, a luxury hotel, and we said the luxury is fragility. It's something you can not know. So we proposed for this hotel, for this client, to make a tower we can broke, where the people have just the only thing is to discuss between them. Sorry for this totally crazy thing, another time I apologize, and I finish with two things about interiors, about domesticity, about architecture, and sometimes the best way to think about space is to produce ourselves, our home space, and sometimes we forget as architects we should experience what we do. So my last experience was to produce my own suit home with one of my last projects, and I produced my personal architecture, destroying my carpet in the studio. Sorry for that. It's great. And the last thing, because probably some of you knows, we are working on a project here in Mexico for alumnos 47, 47. And there is a lot of people asking what will you do the project, what it will look like, etc. It's an experience. It's about a living situation. It's an organization. Alumnos is an organization, and what we are proposing and developing with them, because architecture and all these things, it's not a kind of hedonistic or egoist production. It's not something about sharing. So we are now working in a kind of experience who will be something between a library, between a building for meetings, a place also to work, but a place who will be the territory of the unexpected. So tonight I present you the first drawing, the starting of the project of Alumnos, and that will be my conclusion. Sorry again for this mess. It's about... Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I would just want to ask if someone has like a question or probably want to ask later to Didier with a wine. Here. No? Okay, well, thank you very much all. And thank you, Didier.